I know this is gonna be like gossip, but like there is a certain faction of the online right who say that the Ukrainians are the actual base nationalists because that's the certain few groups and the certain few paramilitary organizations in Ukraine. They wear that certain symbol of the certain sun. But
Yeah.
I think that someone like, for example, Greg Johnson, I believe, I to me he comes off as more sincere because he has been very pro-Ukrainian for many years, since 2008 at least, in Countercurrents. But someone like, Richard Spencer, when they temporarily banned Russians with Attitude, being like, finally the traitors are silenced. I
Mhm.
think that it is very interesting how there is a certain undercurrent to certain ideas of the right wing, like the pan European stuff, for instance, which in an actual European context is kind of ridiculous. But I think that there is a certain strain which can lead, almost like it can become a very like um reverse polarity of like the prevailing sort of like NATO EU liberal order. And it's almost like what me and Mary Harrington were talking about once, where you end up with very like strange conglomerations of ideas that manifest into like their opposite. For example, the what I call the Paul to R9K pipeline, where she was talking about, she got like brutally ratioed for this take one time. This was a year ago, where she talked about how like a certain, that certain subset of people in the gender ideology, how a lot
Mhm.
of them started off as like very far right people, some of them actually, but then they end up becoming the certain spectrum of the certain typology, if you know. I'm trying to use code words for YouTube purposes. But I was explaining to her how in Chan culture, how the ideas of Paul, politically incorrect, which we all know is like the meme, Paul Nazi, Paul Cell, blah blah blah. But how that those ideas can manifest into like a very like extreme form of misogyny. Right?
Mhm.
Now you have R9K, which is, people don't know, the R9K was called the robot board, the containment board. It's basically, it was designed for the green text threats, which people know famously
Mhm.
are like the feels threats, right? But what happened over time is that R9K became this containment board for like the neat, the incel, the sort of, let's say, gender ambiguous, um, the
Mhm.
trap, quote unquote. So you have this like weird colonization of Paul thinking, especially in terms of gender relations.
Mhm.
Then you have this fact where it's like, what, and Mary was talking about this as well, where it's like, I can't become the girlfriend I want, the trad waifu Wheatfield girl. I can't have that, so I become that, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
And they
Yeah.
have it, so it's like this like with a certain element of that certain spectrum or typology, if you will,
Mhm.
by that certain thinker, Blanchard. Then
Mhm.
when you have this sort of like mix of like right wing misogyny, plus like having a sort of very like divorced picture of your own masculinity, and then you also have this environment of like, or rather I should say, this crab bucket of extreme emotivism. you you end up with like a very different picture of the like let's say internet trans person than
Mhm.
you would normally. And of course she was brutally ratioed by the people with Pikru and the flags and the bios and so forth. But no, I think we live in strange times. And so I think figures like Richard Spencer, I mean, uh that is just one example of where certain wires get crossed, and you can end up, through very like marginalized politics, you can end up defending certain things that are quite interesting. Like, I mean, the fact that he's gone full bore on the NATO Ukrainian thing. It's like, I mean, of course, the other explanation is that, well, we all, not to accuse people of anything, but I think we live in interesting times. There is certainly a section of the right who is very pro-Ukrainian, or rather very pro a certain interpretation of the Ukrainian cause. But um, when it comes to the Russian thing, I think that, and this is my last point because I'm just rambling right now. I think that I was talking about this actually, ironically enough, on Break the Rules with Jonathan Kay of all people, who is, for people who don't know, Jonathan Kay is a well, he's like a quiet person now, but I grew up with him because he's Canadian. He's a Canadian journalist, like, hardcore Zionist, hardcore like centrist lib.
Yeah, his mom is a journalist as well, isn't she?
Oh, you're thinking of David Frum.
No, no, I think his I think Jonathan Kay, he works for Quillette, no?
Yes,
I
yes.
think his mom's like a big name journalist as well. I don't know. Maybe I'm mistaking,
Oh,
but
I hope you're not confusing with Barbara Kay because they don't have no relation to each other. But
no? Oh, okay. Doesn't
yeah,
matter.
yeah, I know people get confused all the time with that. Because, like, see, I grew up like reading the National Post because of my old man, so this is like inborn Canadian stuff, right? And Jonathan Kay was like the token lib at the National Post, but now
Mhm.
over time, he's taken on some very quote unquote based positions. But
Mhm.
we were talking about this in terms of what is the appeal of something like Eurasianism on the online right in particular. And he was like, well, it's because if you are someone in the political left of things, in the sort of the current neoliberal order, then you are given a number of how did he put it? You're given a number of identity frameworks that are sort of like palliatives, if you will, for your own alienation. So you're given either, like, if you're lucky enough, if you're blessed enough in Canada to be a certain percentage of Indigenous person, then you are given a sort of easy template to consume of what he said. What did he call it? Like a certain indigeneity, right? Um, or you're given, of course, like the trans thing is, well, especially in certain sectors of the economy, it's quite interesting how the way that it's thought about is like, especially if you're alienated from your own masculinity, then it's a very easy sort of consumable good that can come about to fulfill certain needs. Or, the feminist thing, the Black Lives Matter, let's call it Floydism. Floydism is a good term for it. But if you were in the political right, you were given nothing. No, nothing. You deserve it. Actually, you deserve your own alienation, and you are there. There are templates that were created in house, right? But they, of course, are subject to policing, negative normalization, surveillance, biopower. So the incel thing, the right wing bodybuilder, the homesteader, you go down the list, right? Like, extreme racist anime person, like, but those things are just, they're self-created. They don't have the support. There is not going to be, maybe in the future, who knows, there will be like but like back in the day, back in the early 2000s, they had the oxygen bars. Do you remember this?
No,
The
no.
oxygen bar. Oh, come on, you tech
Oh, no.
person back.
Oh, no, no. The oxygen bar is like where
Yeah.
you would go and have oxygen from a
Yes.
tank.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a candy bar. I was like, no.
No, no. They
No,
have other
yeah, yeah.
forms
That's
of bars with drugs in
very
them, but
retarded. Yeah.
no, the tech people loved it. I had a professor actually. He was like my mentor, and he was my supervisor, my MA supervisor. And he used to go every morning before a lecture. He was like, "Oh yeah, you're juiced up." We had a lecture on the Fido, or we had a lecture on Derrida. He's like, you go. So I think in the future, who knows, there will be ball tan sun test there will be a junk tanning salons in the future where you do the pose and you have like the handlebars to do the pose, and maybe yeah, maybe there'll be something. But for now, for now anyways, I think that the identities, the identity templates you're offered at most is like the Jordan Peterson, not even that, not even that's cast with suspicion, but like, the Jordan Peterson, clean up your room, self improvement, eat steak. Yeah, like the signifiers of, like the Reddit, like having like beard grease and bacon, like that I think is probably like the template, right? But you're given very few options. And so then we were talking about how and he knew like right away, I was actually shocked. because this is a lib, right? He's not actually like a lib in like the pejorative, but
Yeah.
he's like, well, the Russian thing is interesting because now you have this sort of um, exporting of Eastern European politics and ideas that, and people don't know this, but this is, not just, can we say his name, Alexander Dugin?
Mm.
Not not just Dugin, but there's a tradition in Russia of the cosmicists and so forth, right? But I think that Dugin and the new Nouveau Droit in France, they become now this sort of exo or outsider politics for North American, in particular, right wing people, because they offer a template where you can embrace a sort of level of ethno nationalism, but not too explicitly. Like that's Dugan's thing, right? Like a lot of people in
Yeah.
the political right who are like hardcore white
He's not
nationalists, they
he's not racist. I think that's
no,
what people really
so
don't
people
like
don't
about
like it.
Dugan. He's like, "What the hell,
Yeah,
man?"
but then of course, I mean, if you are someone who is of a certain persuasion politically on the right,
Mm.
like you get accused of being a Dugan shill, right? Like Keith Woods is an Islamo Duganist or whatever. My friend Joel Davis, I am an Islamo. This is why. Look, my fez is not just to cover up my Norwood hair, but it's also a symbol of my Islamo Duganism.